Eun Seon-woo is one of the wealthiest and most mysterious men in Seoul. As a successful businessman and owner of a large company, he leads a double life. Under the mask of a respectable businessman, he is a talented private detective who specializes in investigations that are beyond the capabilities of the ordinary police. Thanks to his intelligence, keen sense of justice, and unlimited financial resources, Seon-woo has repeatedly solved the most intricate cases that few people know about, except for his loyal assistant. Today, a new case has caught his attention as he tracks down a powerful businessman he suspects of fraud. Meanwhile, Se-ra, a young girl living a modest life, works several jobs to make ends meet. As a child, she suffered a head injury that left her with an unusual ability. She can see from a great distance, almost as if through a telescope. Although this gift makes her life easier in many ways, Se-ra tries not to tell anyone about it, to avoid unnecessary questions and to avoid attracting attention. One evening, while strolling through the neighborhood looking for a part-time job, Se-ra notices a man in an expensive suit, looking decidedly out of place, watching the restaurant from across the street. His mysterious behavior piques her curiosity, and using her ability, she decides to find out what he's up to. Se-ra sees the man taking pictures of the people sitting inside and making notes in a notebook. She decides to move closer to get a better look at him, but suddenly, sensing someone's gaze, he turns around and notices her. Holding back her embarrassment, Se-ra finds an excuse to approach him, and pretending to be merely curious, asks what he's doing here. Seon-woo assesses her from head to toe, and realizing that she's not a nosy journalist but an ordinary girl, replies that he's doing custom research. There's a touch of irony in his voice, but she senses that he's hiding something and decides to play off her ignorance. Seon-woo, to get rid of the extra attention, pretends to be about to leave, but Se-ra, who's still bothered by the situation, asks if he needs help. Her offer surprises him, and he sees the confidence in her gaze, as if she can really help. To test her, Seon-woo asks her a few questions about the people in the neighborhood, and her answers amaze him. She clearly describes details that are impossible to see with normal eyesight. At one point, he decides to ask a trick question, and Se-ra doesn't hesitate to answer. Suspecting that he is facing someone with unusual abilities, he deliberately asks even more difficult questions, and Se-ra again answers with remarkable accuracy. He realizes that Se-ra's abilities could be useful to him in his investigation, and decides to continue communicating. Slightly puzzled but interested, Se-ra agrees to further cooperation if it will help her discover her own abilities. Seon-woo offers her a challenge, help him with one simple task if she wants to learn more. They follow the suspect together, and Se-ra soon realizes that her new acquaintance is up to much more serious business than she thought. They follow the man to a hotel, where Seon-woo asks her to keep her distance while watching what's going on around them. Using her powers, Se-ra notices odd moments in the suspect's behavior, pointing out details Seon-woo may have missed. Eventually, she helps him get on the trail of a key piece of evidence, and Seon-woo, impressed by her powers of observation and ability to see what others can't, suggests that she continue to help him on the case. Se-ra is hesitant, sensing danger, but she's enticed by the prospect of doing something significant and useful. Meanwhile, Seon-woo begins to suspect that he's met someone with whom he can work as a team, despite her lack of experience in detective work. He decides to find out more about her, and his hunch is confirmed when he finds information about her past that explains the origin of her ability. And Woo realizes that he is facing a person with a gift that can change the course of investigations. He realizes that he is no longer just a random assistant, but someone who can become his true partner. The day after their first investigation together, Eun Seon-woo can't get her encounter with Se-ra out of her mind. Her unusual abilities prove to be not just useful, but invaluable. He decides to find her and offer her a more permanent partnership because he has an even more complicated case waiting for him: the disappearance of a valuable family heirloom. The problem he faces requires just such exceptional abilities as Se-ra's. Se-ra, meanwhile, is also not oblivious to the strange man she met the day before. Her intuition tells her that this was no ordinary businessman. She sees this as a chance to change her life and finally use her gift for something significant. So when Seon-woo finds her and offers to become his partner, she agrees, albeit hesitantly. They arrange a meeting at his office, where he explains the details of the new business. Seon-woo tells her that the relic is not just an antique, but an important symbol for his family. The relic's disappearance carries serious consequences, and he suspects it wasn't a random robbery. Together with Se-ra, He examines the evidence left at the scene of the theft and discovers that the relic was most likely taken out of the building under the guise of a delivery. As they search for clues, Se-ra learns to use her abilities more effectively. She begins to notice the smallest details that indicate the criminal's professionalism. Her first task becomes tracking down the suspected route that witnesses say the criminals may have used to leave the building. Lurking in the distance, Se-ra uses her vision to find suspected cars or tracks that could indicate the kidnapper's movements. She quickly navigates the terrain, finding details that the police missed, and helps Seon-woo get on the trail of a car spotted near the crime scene. Her abilities become key in finding evidence that indicates the car was rented under a fake name and immediately returned. Seon-woo begins to realize that the kidnapper was well aware not only of the location of the relic, but also of his company and business. This information leads him to suspect that someone close to him may be involved. Se-ra sees his personal speculation emerging and suggests that he take his mind off it a bit and act impartially. Their interactions become more and more natural, and a professional trust develops between them. Their work leads them to a suspicious individual who is connected to a recent exhibition organized by one of Seon-woo's partner companies. The man has been on the guest list at several private meetings, and his presence at the relic exhibit is suddenly cut short the day before it disappears. To find out more, Seon-woo decides to travel to the exhibition under the guise of a business associate. He invites Se-ra to join him, where she will also play the role of his assistant. At the expo, Seon-woo and Se-ra encounter another familiar face, an arrogant businessman who has long been trying to connect with Seon-woo and gain access to his assets. Suspecting that he may be the one behind the theft, Seon-woo decides to approach him and strike up a conversation. Se-ra watches their dialogue closely, using her vision to catch the smallest gestures and facial expressions. She notices that at the mention of the relic, the suspect subtly tenses up and looks in the direction where the security representative is standing. They decide to follow the man after the exhibit, and soon Se-ra notices him getting into a car that she recalls looks similar to the one at the scene of the theft. Pursuing him from a distance, they come to an abandoned building where, as it turns out, he meets up with other suspicious individuals. Before they can get any closer, however, security notices them and tries to apprehend them. Using his knowledge of the area, Seon-woo leads Se-ra to a safe exit, avoiding a direct confrontation. At that moment, he realizes how dangerous the case he's dragged her into is. He suggests that she withdraw from the investigation, realizing the risk, but Se-ra refuses, confidently stating that she can handle it and is ready to continue. She stubbornly emphasizes that, for the first time in her life, she feels that her gift can be of use and she intends to see it through to the end. Se-ra's words impress Seon-woo, and he decides not to hold her back. Turning home, Se-ra is still feeling the adrenaline rush. She realizes that situations like this could happen again, but Seon-woo's confidence in her abilities makes her feel important and determined to continue. The next day, they meet to continue their investigation. Now sure they're on the right track, Seon-woo organizes access to his company's documents to find out which employees may have passed information to the kidnappers. As Se-ra scrutinizes the lists and records, he concludes that the criminals clearly had an insider, but from all the evidence, it's not yet possible to pinpoint exactly who. Se-ra, however, through his attention to detail, finds subtle changes in the security reports that could indicate the involvement of one of the trusted employees. Now full partners, Eun Seon-woo and Se-ra take on their first investigation together. Although Se-ra is still new to detective work, Seon-woo is impressed by her unusual abilities and sincere determination. He decides to gradually teach her the ins and outs of the case so that she can act confidently in any situation. Se-ra listens to Seon-woo's instructions with enthusiasm and interest. Although his serious approach sometimes seems too rigid, he doesn't tolerate mistakes and demands her utmost concentration. However, Se-ra, who is used to dealing with difficulties alone, quickly gets used to his style of working. She realizes that Seon-woo trusts her, and that inspires her to try even harder. The first case they have to solve involves a series of thefts of valuable objects from the city's elite galleries. The thefts are carefully planned and take place in different locations, but the criminals' methods and behavior indicate that the same group is behind them. Seon-woo suspects that a group of professional thieves who have long been operating under the guise of charity events are involved. One such event is coming up in just a few days, and Seon-woo offers Se-ra the opportunity to test herself in a real-life situation. To avoid arousing suspicion, Seon-woo introduces Se-ra as his assistant at the charity event. Se-ra, wearing a beautiful dress and understated makeup, looks like she's hard to recognize. She's feeling a little insecure, but Seon-woo's support helps her pull herself together. They discreetly survey the room, paying attention to each of the guests, especially those who are suspicious. Using her ability to see details from a great distance, Se-ra tracks the suspect's every move, making notes on her phone. At one point, she notices a strange figure trying to hide in the shadows of the hall. The stranger is clearly looking for something, examining the valuable artifacts on display at the auction. She points him out to Seon-woo, and they decide to follow the man without drawing attention to themselves. As they approach the suspect, he suddenly notices them and heads for the exit without wasting any time. Seon-woo and Se-ra follow him, trying to remain inconspicuous. The pursuit leads them to the back entrance of the building, where the suspect seems to get lost in the crowd of guests. Se-ra concentrates and, thanks to his vision, notices that he is hidden behind one of the columns, waiting for an opportune moment to escape. They decide to ambush him and pretend not to notice him. When the suspect comes out of hiding, Seon-woo intercepts him and starts interrogating him, posing as a security officer. The suspect is nervous but doesn't reveal any information, only accusing Seon-woo of interfering with powerful people. These words alarm Seon-woo and Se-ra, and they realize that powerful people who operate through mercenaries like this suspect may be behind the thefts. Since they have no direct evidence, Seon-woo decides to let the suspect go, but his hunch only grows stronger. They return to the hall and decide to continue watching the other guests. The evening passes quietly, but Seon-woo and Se-ra sense that someone in the hall is watching them. They notice the furtive glances of several people who seem to realize that there are watchers among the guests. When the evening ends, Seon-woo and Se-ra leave the event with new suspicions and a determination to learn more. They realize that they are acting against a powerful group capable of covering their tracks and covering up evidence. On the way home, Se-ra shares with Seon-woo her hunches about the people she saw. Her powers of observation help them piece together the disparate fragments into a more coherent picture. Seon-woo and Se-ra's investigation continues, and their partnership grows stronger. Se-ra learns important detective work techniques from Seon-woo as she gains experience, and he becomes more and more convinced that her abilities are a unique gift without which it would be difficult to succeed in the current case. A relaxed atmosphere develops between them, and Se-ra begins to feel more confident. A new day brings new leads. One of the suspects who attended the evening they worked earlier turns out to be connected to a network of private auctions that are notoriously opaque. Seon-woo believes that these auctions may be where stolen relics and antiques find their way to new owners. He suggests that Se-ra use her powers to, while remaining inconspicuous, observe the building where a private auction is about to take place. This methodical approach helps them gather additional data on who is attending the event and what might be sold. Se-ra prepares for the surveillance and embarks on her assignment. Carefully hiding at a safe distance, she tracks the guests, their movements, and picks up on any suspicious details. Using her gift of sight, she notices some of the auctioneers discreetly passing small bags and boxes to each other, obviously containing illegal or stolen goods. Her attentiveness allows her to memorize several license plates of cars that enter the secured area near the building, and Seon-woo quickly uses this information to find connections between the auction guests. After a while, Seon-woo receives another unexpected fact. One of the owners of the auction house had previously had financial problems, but has suddenly received a solid investment. He soon realizes that this money may have come from powerful people, interested in keeping their shady dealings confidential. With each new clue, a network of influential connections unfolds in front of Seon-woo and Se-ra, making their case even more complicated. After hours of surveillance, Se-ra notices one of the suspects they encountered at the party enter the auction building, greeted by a delegation of unknown individuals, one of whom seemed familiar to her. She gives Seon-woo a description, and they find out that the man has ties to the underworld. Seon-woo decides not to leave Se-ra alone, but to go with her to the building to try to get more information about the people involved in the auction. When they arrive at the location, they are suddenly spotted by a security guard who demands an explanation from them. Seon-woo cleverly pretends that they're random passersby, but the guard doesn't back down and calls for backup. Se-ra is nervous but remains calm, and luckily they manage to escape before backup arrives. The incident brings them even closer together, And Seon-woo realizes that his ally is not only talented, but also has the courage to act in stressful situations. Later, back at base, they decide that they should try to get more information about the financial flows involved in this auction. Seon-woo plugs in her resources to analyze the financial documents and finds traces of large sums of money coming from anonymous depositors. This becomes another clue for them. Now know that powerful individuals are funding the auction for their own benefit and using it to launder money and distribute stolen valuables. With each passing day, Se-ra becomes more and more involved in the investigation. She realizes that her abilities are not only useful, but also dangerous. Their uniqueness attracts the attention of those who would want to take advantage of them. Seon-woo notices her anxiety and suggests she take a break, but Se-ra, feeling determined, refuses. She explains that for the first time in her life, her gift is being put to good use and she has no intention of stopping. Seon-woo respects her determination, but cautions her against overworking herself and the possible consequences. He realizes that Se-ra isn't just interested in the work, but sees investigations as an opportunity to grow and feel meaningful. Her enthusiasm reminds him of his own desire for justice, and they develop a mutual understanding that goes beyond the usual professional partnership. As time passes, the investigation becomes more and more dangerous. Eun Seon-woo and Se-ra face more experienced and sophisticated adversaries than they ever thought possible. Seon-woo suspects that their actions have attracted the attention of a criminal network connected to the auction house, and now all their moves are under close surveillance. He realizes that their adversary knows not only about the investigation, but also about their methods. He decides to take the bulk of the investigation to keep Se-ra safe, but she refuses to stay away. This is not just an assignment for her, but a personal challenge she intends to take on. Together, they begin searching for clues that will help confirm their hunches and reveal exactly who is behind this criminal network. One of their key goals becomes discovering the identity of a mysterious auction house investor they learned about earlier. The suspect is revealed to be using front men and shell companies to launder money. Se-ra uses her ability to help Seon-woo follow the people who come to the suspect's office, hoping that one of them will lead them to the master organizer. For long hours, Se-ra, remaining stealthy, watches the suspects. She sees one of them meeting with a man previously mentioned in police reports as an alleged member of a criminal network. Seon-woo decides to take a chance and try to follow up on this meeting to learn more, but their plan is thwarted when unknown people suddenly appear and start following them. Realizing that they've been spotted, Seon-woo and Se-ra try to escape. At that moment, Seon-woo gives her a command to leave for a safe place to minimize the risks. Se-ra reluctantly agrees, but before she leaves, she manages to give Seon-woo some important information. One of the suspects is wearing a rare badge that could be an important clue. This badge is linked to a secret society to which their suspects may belong. The next day, using the new information, Seon-woo returns to the office, where he begins to research the history and symbolism of the badge he found. He discovers that the badge belongs to a private club that includes members of the political and financial elite. These people often use their power to cover up illegal activities and maintain their network, making the investigation even more dangerous. Meanwhile, Se-ra, worried about Seon-woo, begins to gather information about the club on her own. Her persistence and observation lead to an unexpected discovery. She finds a record of a private meeting of the club's members to be held at the end of the week. She immediately reports this to Seon-woo, and they decide it's the perfect chance to find out who's behind the thefts and illegal transactions. The day of the meeting arrives, and Seon-woo and Se-ra head to the location, masquerading as maintenance workers. Trying to remain undetected, they sneak into the hall where the club members are gathered. Se-ra, using her gift, tries to recognize the members, watching their every move. She notices one of the members, dressed in a dark suit, actively chatting with a man whose face is hidden behind dark glasses, and intuitively realizes that this could be a key figure in the network. During her surveillance, Se-ra runs into one of the club's female employees, who happens to recognize her and begins to suspect that she's here for a reason. Seon-woo reacts quickly and, by distracting the female employee, helps Se-ra go unnoticed. They hide in the hallway, where after discussing what they've seen, they decide that the most important thing is to keep an eye on the man with glasses. This could be the investor who is running the entire operation from the shadows. Their surveillance comes to a dead end when one of the guards spots them in the hallway and starts raising the alarm. They manage to escape, but now they know they have been exposed. they leave the meeting, realizing that each next move will be even more dangerous than the last. However, this night has brought them valuable information, and they are sure that the clue is close at hand. On the way home, Seon-woo, seeing the fatigue on Se-ra's face, suggests that she take a break, but she firmly refuses. She confesses that this investigation has become more than just another assignment for her, and that she wants to continue the fight despite the dangers. Her determination touches Seon-woo, and he sees that her commitment to the case and strength of character make her an excellent partner. Their interactions feel more and more like teamwork, where everyone understands each other without words. Their looks and gestures begin to show mutual trust and sympathy, but both are in no hurry to say it out loud just yet. Instead, they silently prepare for the next stage of the investigation, which will become even more complicated. After recent events, the investigation begins to get more and more personal. Se-ra feels increasingly threatened, especially after they encounter a mysterious investor and a network backed by powerful people. Eun Seon-woo, seeing her determination, still realizes that the situation is becoming too dangerous. He tries to prepare her for the possible risks and emphasizes safety, but Se-ra won't back down and insists she's ready to move on. Seon-woo, realizing her stubbornness, decides to share a piece of his past with her so she can better understand his motivation. He reveals that he became a detective not only for justice, but also for personal reasons. As a child, he lost his parents in tragic circumstances that the police were unable to solve. Since then, his goal has been to restore justice, and he cannot turn a blind eye to crimes, especially when they involve those who hide behind status and influence. This frank conversation brings them even closer together, and Se-ra feels that his pain and desire for justice has become part of her life. Meanwhile, their investigation continues. Seon-woo decides that they need to look deeper into the members of the club they attended. He taps his resources to gather full profile on anyone who might have been involved in illegal activities, and soon discovers a connection between the club members and some businesses dealing in antiques and historical relics. These businesses are registered under false identities, making the task more difficult. But with the help of Se-ra, who uses her powers for surveillance, they soon discover the location where the stolen valuables are supposedly stored. Deciding to set up surveillance of the place, they arrive at an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. Se-ra, using her keen eyesight, notices that the building is equipped with hidden cameras and motion sensors, indicating that the warehouse is highly secure. She also sees several guards patrolling the area, confirming that valuable or illegal items may be stored here. Despite the risk, they decide to follow up on how the facility is being used, hoping it will lead them to those who organize the entire chain of theft and sale. While monitoring the warehouse, Se-ra notices suspicious vans that arrive at the same time every night. As the guards begin loading boxes into these vehicles, she points Seon-woo to license plates that can be traced. They record every detail, and soon they have a list of the vehicles involved in the scheme. On one such evening, they decide to follow one of the vans, despite the risks involved. During the chase, Seon-woo and Se-ra encounter adversaries who are willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their interests. When the guards notice that the van is being followed, they try to cut them off. Seon-woo quickly gets his bearings and maneuvers to successfully evade the pursuit, but it becomes clear to him that their adversary is serious and will not stop at threats. This danger makes him even more worried about Se-ra, and he again suggests that she get out of the case before it's too late. But Se-ra flatly refuses, explaining that she wants to see this through to the end. Her determination delights Seon-woo, and he realizes that they're together no matter what lies ahead. When they return to the base, Seon-woo continues to analyze the data they've collected, while Se-ra decides to do a little investigating of her own. She recalls her speculation about a club badge she noticed on one of the members, and decides to spend more time reading the archives to learn the history of the organization. His search leads to an unexpected discovery. The club to which their suspects belong has a rich history and has been repeatedly implicated in covert operations and corruption scandals that have gone unsolved due to its ties to the authorities. Realizing that they are facing a powerful enemy, Seon-woo and Se-ra begin to prepare to mount an operation to gather evidence that will help expose the network. They realize that they need to infiltrate the warehouse and obtain evidence that can confirm the club members' involvement in illegal activities. For doing so, Seon-woo decides that they need to plan everything down to the smallest detail. He and Se-ra devise a plan that will allow them to sneak into the warehouse and collect the evidence they need without arousing suspicion. A night of intense preparation awaits them, during which they test every step of the operation. Seon-woo does his best to keep Se-ra safe and takes on the most dangerous tasks himself. A special atmosphere of trust and support develops between them, and each of them realizes that they are willing to take risks for the other. On the day of the operation, Seon-woo and Se-ra, carefully disguised, sneak into the warehouse. They work smoothly and quietly, following a prearranged plan. They manage to get to the document room, where they find the logbooks that prove the club's connection to the criminal network. Se-ra takes photographs, recording everything for future investigation. After a tense night operation, Seon-woo and Se-ra analyze the evidence they've obtained. Their find at the warehouse confirms that the club their suspects belong to is involved in criminal activity. Among the many documents they manage to photograph, Seon-woo finds records of transactions involving an international criminal network involved in the illegal sale of artifacts and antiques. This discovery only strengthens his resolve to see the case through, but he realizes that the stakes are now even higher. Se-ra, sensing Seon-woo's tension, decides to find out more about his past as their connection grows deeper every day. She begins to question him about what made him become a detective and why he's so attached to the case. Seeing her genuine interest, Seon-woo shares a personal story, revealing a part of him that he's never told anyone. He reveals that he lost his parents in a suspicious accident that still remains unsolved. His quest for justice is a way to find answers and restore their honor. Seon-woo's words touch Se-ra, and she begins to realize that his cold and reserved image hides deep pain. She decides to support him to help him achieve his goal. In response, Seon-woo admits that his life has become brighter with her appearance, and that her support gives him the strength to move on. This conversation brings them closer together, and they each realize that they can trust each other, not only in business, but also in their personal feelings. Meanwhile, new evidence leads them to a high-ranking member of the club, who is involved in the affairs of their criminal network. Seon-woo decides to set up a stakeout to find out who the man is involved with. Together with Se-ra, they observe the man, taking note of every detail. During one of the surveillance sessions, Se-ra notices that the suspect goes to a country house where he is often visited by unknown people, who then disappear without a trace. Seon-woo and Se-ra decide to take a chance and follow him to check out what's going on at the house. At night, under the cover of darkness, they approach the building and begin their surveillance. Se-ra uses his powers to inspect the house from a distance and notices that there are many guards on the grounds, making it almost impossible to break in. Nevertheless, they decide to stay nearby and find out what meetings are taking place inside. After a while, they notice several expensive cars pull up to the house and see the suspect greeting his guests, which turn out to include people Se-ra had previously seen at a private auction. These people bring with them small boxes, and Seon-woo surmises that there may be stolen artifacts inside. They record everything that happens on camera so that they can then use the footage as evidence. On back home after a night of surveillance, Seon-woo and Se-ra analyze the materials they have collected. They realize that they are on the verge of uncovering a criminal network, and realize that now they have to face the most difficult part of the process, uncovering the information so that the criminals don't have time to destroy the evidence and escape. After gathering all the evidence, they will turn to the authorities with the support of a few trusted people they can trust. Meanwhile, Se-ra is at a turning point in her life. She begins to think about her future and realizes that her life has changed dramatically since she met Seon-woo. She feels that their connection is no longer enough of a partnership, but is hesitant to say it out loud just yet. Seon-woo, also aware of her feelings, tries to remain professional, but can't hide the affectionate glances he occasionally throws in her direction. The next morning, after a night of surveillance, comes with a sense of anxious anticipation. Eun Seon-woo and Se-ra realize that they are now at the center of a complex investigation that exposes a deep network of criminal connections. Their adversary is not just a group of thieves, but a powerful network willing to go to any lengths to keep their secrets. Despite the danger, they continue to gather evidence, and each new step brings them closer to uncovering the protagonists. As they search for more evidence, they return to a list of elite club members who they have already realized are behind many illegal operations in the city. Seon-woo proposes a risky plan to infiltrate a private meeting of the club, to personally record the exchange of stolen artifacts and find out who is at the helm of the entire operation. He suggests that Se-ra go undercover to sneak in and give him the information while he is prepared for any turn of events. At the upcoming meeting, they decide to proceed cautiously. Se-ra, pretending to be an employee, sneaks into the building where the meeting is being held. Her ability to notice the smallest details helps her avoid suspicion and remain unnoticed. She discreetly observes the members as they gather in the hall, exchanging information and discussing upcoming deals. Soon, Seon-woo, lurking among the guests, joins in the surveillance as well. As the meeting begins, Se-ra sees one of the members make a sign to another, hinting that some sort of exchange is about to begin. She quietly relays this information to Seon-woo, and they decide to cautiously move closer to the main hall to record everything that's happening. There, they see one of the club's executives receiving a box of artifacts that his subordinates handed to him. Seon-woo realizes that this is the same investor seen at the auction, and now realizes that he is the one running the network. While Seon-woo is recording what's happening, Se-ra notices another familiar person, the same powerful businessman they've already encountered in a previous case. Realizing that their suspicions were correct, she gives Seon-woo the information and suggests they leave the building before they're discovered. But before they can leave, the guard spots Se-ra and the alarm is raised. The situation escalates, and Seon-woo, realizing that they are in grave danger, decides to distract the guards to give Se-ra a chance to escape. He hides among the crowd, and Se-ra takes advantage of the moment to stealthily exit the building and head for the prearranged exit. But before she leaves, she manages to capture evidence of criminal dealings on her phone, which becomes invaluable evidence for them. After this incident, Seon-woo and Se-ra return to the base, where they analyze the collected materials. The videos and photos clearly show how the transfer of stolen artifacts takes place, and they now have direct proof of the club's involvement in the illegal trade. They decide that this is their chance to expose the network and pass the information to the authorities. However, Seon-woo realizes that their actions could have serious consequences. After making sure that the evidence is secure, he decides to prepare for a possible attack from his enemies if they find out that their investigation has reached its final stage. At the same time, he becomes increasingly cautious in his relationship with Se-ra, trying to protect her from threats, but she assures him that she will not back down and will follow him too. Meanwhile, the feelings between them become more and more evident. The mutual trust and support built up during their investigation begins to develop into an affection that they find it hard to hide. However, realizing that their investigation is not yet complete, they both decide to resist their emotions and focus on their mission. As they plan the final stage of their investigation, Seon-woo and Se-ra prepare to hand over the evidence they've collected to vetted people in the police and media. They realize that they can count on a very limited number of allies, as the enemy has immense power and can influence the authorities. Before the final move, Seon-woo takes the time to speak to Se-ra alone. He thanks her for her help and support, recognizing that he couldn't have done it without her. Se-ra, sensing that this acknowledgement comes from his deep gratitude, replies that beside him she has found her place and meaning in her ability for the first time. Seon-woo and Se-ra are about to put all the evidence they've collected into the hands of trusted allies. They arrange a meeting with a trusted police officer who is willing to help expose the network and organize protection for both of them. However, realizing how dangerous their adversary is, Seon-woo decides to further encrypt the evidence and store copies in several safe locations. His premonitions are justified when he receives a message that a surveillance has been started on them. This makes them even more cautious. At dawn, the day of the evidence handover, Se-ra notices a suspicious car on the street outside her house. She contacts Seon-woo, and they decide that to be safe, she needs to temporarily move to his secret hideout. Despite the danger, Se-ra feels at ease around him and takes his concern as a sign that their relationship has moved beyond a normal partnership. She realizes that Seon-woo is doing everything he can to protect her. Before meeting with the officer, they decide to check everything they've collected one more time to make sure their enemies can't make excuses or cover their tracks. They discover that amongst all the documents is a key file that links some high-ranking individuals to the club. This file is the final piece of the puzzle, and Seon-woo realizes that by surrendering it, they will finally bring down the defenses the network has been using. So when they arrive at the meeting place with the officer, they are spotted again by people from the crime network, and suddenly, the plan changes. The officer they contacted turns out to have been bribed, and at the last minute gives their enemies information about their location. Seon-woo and Se-ra realize they are trapped, but act quickly. They manage to escape thanks to her keen eyesight and his quick decisions, but they realize they can no longer trust anyone in the police force. While in hiding, they discuss what to do next. Se-ra suggests using the media, handing the stories over to journalists who can bring public attention to the network's crimes. Seon-woo agrees to her plan, and they begin preparations, contacting independent reporters known for their integrity. Their task is to organize the interviews and evidence so that it becomes public and no one else can cover their track. As they prepare to meet the reporters, the depth of their feelings between them becomes more and more apparent. Seon-woo can't hide how much he appreciates Se-ra, and openly says that her support has given him the strength to go on despite the dangers. Se-ra, in turn, replies that he was the one who helped her see the true purpose of her gift. There's a moment of tenderness between them, but they decide to stay focused on the mission, realizing that for now, safety is more important. On the appointed day, they meet with reporters at a secluded location. Seon-woo hands over all the evidence, and Se-ra recounts what they've seen and what they've learned during their investigation. The journalists are amazed at the extent of the criminal network and promise to publish the stories as soon as they confirm the authenticity of the documents. At the same time, Seon-woo and Se-ra are prepared for possible retaliation from the criminals. Soon after the evidence is handed over, they are pursued. They find themselves in a tense chase as they try to evade the mercenaries sent by the club. Seon-woo struggles to maneuver on the road, and Se-ra uses his abilities to help him avoid obstacles and dodge enemies. During the chase, they do find a shelter where they can catch their breath and consider their next moves. Se-ra suggests that they split up again, to make it harder for the enemy and create confusion. Seon-woo agrees, but asks her to be careful and stay out of open areas. Left alone, he uses his influence to warn his remaining allies and prepare a backup plan in case they have to take cover again. While they are in hiding, news of the expose begins to spread. Stories are published in major media outlets, and the public is shocked at the extent of the club's corruption and influence. Seon-woo's name, as the main instigator of the investigation, also makes headlines, and he realizes that from now on, he will have to live with caution until the entire network is completely destroyed. Se-ra and Eun Seon-woo find themselves in even greater danger after the expose is published. The public is shocked by the extent of the criminal network, but the criminals still have enough power to cover their tracks. Realizing that their lives are in real danger, Seon-woo and Se-ra decide that they need to find the last piece of evidence that will lead to the full exposure of the network's key figures. At this point, the enemy decides to act more aggressively. Se-ra gets caught in the act. She is targeted by people from a criminal organization who know that she was the one who helped Seon-woo in collecting the evidence. They try to track her down and force her to hand over information about where the latest evidence is. Realizing that she's in danger, Se-ra contacts Seon-woo and tells him what's going on. He immediately takes action to get her out of harm's way, and to protect her, decides to temporarily hide her in a safe place. While hiding in the secluded location, Se-ra feels vulnerable, but decides to use this time to analyze the evidence she has left. She discovers a clue that could become crucial evidence. One of the names in the documents is linked to a powerful individual hiding behind multiple front men and offshore accounts. This person, it turns out, was directly in charge of the club's operations and had ties to high-ranking officials. Se-ra immediately relays this information to Seon-woo. Seon-woo realizes that this is their chance to strike a final blow to the network. He decides to get in touch with a trusted journalist and arrange for the publication of a new story naming a key figure in the organization. Meanwhile, people from the network, realizing that exposure is near, try to pursue Seon-woo. He is faced with a difficult choice: either continue to protect Se-ra and go into hiding, or take a risk and try to finish the case to the end by collecting the last piece of evidence. Seon-woo decides to take the risk. He meets with a journalist and hands him the latest documents, hoping that this material can finally bring down the network. In the process of handing them over, he notices that they are being watched. Realizing that his enemies are willing to do anything, he purposely leaves false traces to confuse them and buy time. He manages to deceive his pursuers and escape, but he realizes that he and Se-ra will have to be even more careful until the investigation is complete. Meanwhile, Se-ra decides not to stay away either. She feels that her involvement in the investigation helped uncover the criminal network, but realizes that the enemy may try to harm Seon-woo again, so she's willing to take the risk again, and despite the danger, come out of hiding to confront him and help him. Realizing that their lives are now bound together not only by their joint mission, but also by strong feelings, Se-ra decides that together they can deal with the threat. When they meet, their plan becomes clear. Their goal is to completely expose the network's last key figure and secure her arrest. They decide to organize a final meeting with the authorities, also inviting several independent journalists so that information about the crimes cannot be hidden or hushed up. However, the enemy is not slumbering. Hours before the final meeting, the criminals ambush Se-ra in an attempt to force her to hand over the remaining documents and reveal Seon-woo's location. Realizing that the enemy is ready for anything, Seon-woo rushes to the rendezvous point and saves Se-ra at the last moment, leading her away from her pursuers in time. They hide in a safe place, where they ponder their next steps. Despite the threat, they have no intention of backing down. They decide to act decisively and publish all the collected evidence in several publications simultaneously. Thanks to the support of independent journalists, the information becomes public and the authorities can no longer ignore the network's crimes. New publications lead to a major investigation, and finally, the enemy is left without a defense. After uncovering the network of criminals, Eun Seon-woo and Se-ra's lives gradually return to normal. However, this completion has left a mark on each of them. Seon-woo, used to being alone, feels that his connection with Se-ra has become something much more than just a partnership in the investigation. He realizes that her support and loyalty has made him stronger, and for the first time in a long time, he's willing to share his future with someone. Se-ra also feels her life has changed. Everything they've been through has made her stronger and unlocked the potential of her ability that she used to be afraid to tap into. She feels the self-confidence she's always lacked and sees that her connection with Seon-woo is more than just a lucky coincidence. Meanwhile, the consequences of their actions begin to show. The entourage of the criminals they exposed decide to avenge their failure. Among those left at large are people with great connections who are eager to regain their positions and are willing to use any means to do. Seon-woo realizes that he and Se-ra may remain targets and suggests that she go into hiding temporarily and take a break until the situation settles down. Se-ra reluctantly agrees, but only on the condition that Seon-woo stays close by. They go out of town, finding a secluded place where they can spend time away from the spotlight. This quiet time gives them a chance to be alone, share their thoughts, and finally acknowledge the feelings they have for each other. Seon-woo thanks Se-ra for everything she's done, recognizing that her determination and dedication saved him not only from danger, but also from the loneliness he was used to. During these days alone together, they decide that they will be together in the future. But the peace of mind doesn't last long. Seon-woo receives word that part of the unmasked network is planning to reorganize itself, using its surviving connections to get things going again. He realizes that their work is not yet done and offers to help Se-ra with a new investigation. Seon-woo and Se-ra's powers are restored after a short break, but they realize that their fight isn't over. The remnants of the unmasked network begin to reorganize using their surviving resources and connections. In order to completely destroy this criminal system, they need to gather the last evidence and bring all the criminals out into the light so that they can no longer revive their activities. They make a plan to dismantle the remaining cells of the network. To do this, Seon-woo decides to use his knowledge of each of the former members who are behind all the illegal activity. He and Se-ra devise a strategy to infiltrate the last surviving circles while the network is still weak and its members demoralized after the recent arrest. The first step is to track down the latest suspects who are still trying to escape. Se-ra uses her abilities to follow the movements of the network's members from afar, finding their secret meeting places. She records all routes with precision and relays the information to Seon-woo, who adjusts her actions based on their locations. Their teamwork, based on complete trust, allows them to stay one step ahead despite the enemy's precautions. When they have enough information on their hands, they decide to organize one last operation. Seon-woo contacts those who supported them in the previous investigation to secure both themselves and the data they have collected. With the help of their allies, they coordinate the final expose, handing over the evidence to authorities and public figures willing to support their fight. The night before the final phase of the operation, Seon-woo and Se-ra are alone together, away from the noise and turmoil. They realize that the final, most decisive steps are ahead of them. In a quiet conversation, they confess their feelings to each other, realizing that the path they have traveled together has changed their lives. Se-ra thanks Seon-woo for believing in her abilities and always supporting her. Seon-woo, in turn, admits that Se-ra has become not only an ally to him, but also the person he trusts most. The next day, they complete the operation, The police arrest the last members of the network, making the criminal organization completely destroyed. The public learns the full extent of their work, and their struggle becomes a symbol of the victory of justice. They realize that their mission has been accomplished, and now a new future opens up before them. With everything behind them, Seon-woo and Se-ra can finally enjoy the moment. They leave the scene together, knowing that all that time spent in danger and struggle has only brought them closer together. Now that all the threats are behind them, they decide to start a life where there will be no room for loneliness and fear, only support and mutual trust.